Hey there, my wedding planning friends, and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, thanks so much for clicking on my video. I'm Emily Summer. I'm a wedding planner based in Montana, and I make weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice. So the purpose of giving you videos and tips on wedding planning is to help you avoid any mishaps or set you up for success the best way possible for your wedding. However, things inevitably happen, things go wrong, and that's not necessarily, the end of the world. A lot of times they're just minor things that are easily fixable, but I wanted to do a video all about kind of how to handle certain things that happen on your wedding day or when things don't go to plan, and give you some examples of times things haven't gone completely to plan in my experience wedding planning as well. So in order to set you up for the most success and be prepared for your wedding day, there are two main factors to consider that are the most common that play into when things go wrong on your wedding, and that is overall timing and the weather. So let's talk about timing first. Timing in general is really important on your wedding day, as there's a lot of things that have to happen and schedule and make sure that everything is flowing on the wedding day. And when you get behind, that is kind of the easiest thing that goes wrong on the wedding day. So you want to make sure that you are planning out your timeline, that you have things scheduled at certain times, and that you're also allowing good buffer time. So just because you have something on the schedule, you want to make sure that you are thinking through how long that's going to take. So if you're scheduling things like back to back to back, and if you fall behind or you're running late on any of those previous items, that's going to push you for the whole rest of the night, and there's not really any time to make up that time or catch up, and you're just going to be behind for the rest of the evening. So allow yourself some buffer time when you are scheduling out your wedding day timeline and the events that are happening, and make sure that you are kind of overestimating how long things are going to take. And for example, pictures, overestimate the amount of time that you are going to need for bridal party photos, overestimate how long it's going to take for your first look, and then getting into your reception. Something I always do is allow for extra time for things like your grand entrance. That will take all of 5 minutes. Usually I plan out 15 in that time, so that if we are running a little bit behind, we have a little bit of extra wiggle room there. So if we are running like 5 or 10 minutes behind from the ceremony or from pictures or whatever, we're not super behind getting into dinner. So I'll account for like 15 minutes from the time people are inside seating to when dinner's supposed to start. Another little extra buffer time I add in is during toasts and dances. Toasts I will usually schedule about 30 minutes. Please don't make your toast last 30 minutes. 15 to 20 is maximum when you have toasts. But again, I will schedule a 30-minute block for toast. So if we're running behind anytime earlier, you still have that extra buffer time. And then again with the dances. So first dance, father-daughter dance, mother-son dance, I will schedule about 15 to 20 minutes in there as well. And when you think about it and how long a dance, one song is, really that takes about 5-6 minutes total. So you've got some wiggle room in all of those activities so that if you are running behind, it's not going to kind of set everything off schedule. So just consider that when you're making a wedding day timeline. If you are doing it yourself, make sure that you are putting buffer time and just kind of overestimate the amount of time that things are going to take, especially if you have any travel. So if you're traveling from a ceremony location to a reception location, make sure that you're giving ample time for travel and just have that extra buffer time, because you could run into road construction, there could be an accident where you're getting backed up and people are arriving late, and you want to make sure that you are just allowing for any of that flexibility in your schedule. Second is the weather. So this is an unpredictable situation and something that you can plan for, worst case scenario, but you can't really plan for what's going to happen on the day. So just make sure that you are thinking through all of the plan Bs. If you have an outdoor ceremony and an outdoor reception, make sure you have a plan B, have a backup plan for if it rains, have a tent set up, or if there's an indoor space where you're doing your reception, have a plan if you need to turn that into your ceremony spot and be able to flip it into reception space later. Just think through basically worst case scenario weather-wise when it comes to your venue and your location, because that is something that is not what you want to have to think up on the fly on the day of. Having a good plan B and a weather plan and a backup plan for your wedding day. It's going to take a lot of stress off of you, especially if you need to kind of enact that plan on your wedding day. Another thing that people don't really think about is the wind. So if you're having an outdoor ceremony or reception, and it's a place that is windy or wide open, so there gets a lot of wind blown through, I've seen a lot of things kind of go wrong with the wind. And just to kind of set yourself up so that you're not having to deal with it on the wedding day, if you know that your venue is a spot that tends to get windy, don't have any vases that are tall. This is going to be top heavy, and if the wind blows through, and whether that's on your cocktail tables or whether it's lighting the aisle of your ceremony, that's going to blow over very easily. So if you know that you're going to get wind in the area, just don't even deal with anything that's going to be tall, so that this isn't an issue or that you don't have to clean up broken glass in the middle of your cocktail hour or anything like that. Another thing to consider is if you do have florals, if you're doing an outdoor reception and you have any loose florals, loose greenery on your tables, any gust of wind is going to blow those right off. So I know that we have talked about the cost effectiveness of having loose greenery instead of garland, and that is much cheaper than having an actual constructed garland. However, if you are having a reception outside and the wind blows, those loose greenery and the loose florals are just going to blow right off the table. So if you are doing it outside and you want that look, I would highly, highly suggest just opting for the constructed garland, because that's not going to go anywhere. I have had to completely reset multiple tables before at a reception or just before the reception because the wind came through and blew everything off. And luckily I was there, and there was me, myself, and my assistant were there to kind of reset that. But if you don't have a coordinator, if you don't have somebody to take care of that for you, that's going to be an absolute nightmare. On that note, having a day of coordinator is really crucial when it comes to little things that might go wrong on your wedding day, because like I've mentioned in previous videos, things go wrong. Typically they're small little things and they have an easy fix, and if you have a day of coordinator there, they are on top of it, they're going to manage it. If you don't, then either you may not even realize there's an issue because you're too busy getting ready, as you should be, and enjoying your time, and it might be too late by the time you realize there's an issue to be able to resolve it, or just the stress and the emotions of the day might make that problem seem a lot bigger than it actually is, and then it's going to cause you even more stress and make you more overwhelmed. And so I just can't reiterate enough how important it is to have at least a day of coordinator, just for your own sanity and your own sake, so that you can just enjoy your day. On that note, if you do not have a day of coordinator and something comes up and you realize there's an issue, the best way to handle it is to, first of all, just take a deep breath. Maybe your maid of honor or your mom or somebody that can talk to you and calm you down, have a conversation with them, and try and gain some perspective on how important the issue really is. Likely it's going to be something that only you know about, or only you are going to recognize because you are so involved in the wedding planning. And so having a conversation with somebody that can calm you down or that you trust to kind of gain some perspective on the situation and realize, is this something that is worth stressing out about? Is this going to change my wedding day? If the answer is no, if it's just a small issue like you forgot the welcome sign or something like that, where sure, it's a bummer and that's something that you had planned for, but nobody else is going to know. If it's something larger than this is where you want to delegate. Find somebody that is on site, your maid of honor, a family member, your mom, somebody that's on site that isn't you, to kind of tackle this and handle this issue so that it's not on you. So I have planned and coordinated 100 weddings, and I have seen some things go wrong, obviously. So I'm going to give you some examples of times that things haven't gone completely to plan, because it does happen, and kind of how we resolved it and what you can maybe do to become a little bit better prepared for these issues. So a lot of these happened earlier on in my career, and you kind of live and learn and can anticipate things that go wrong as time goes on. And so a lot of these issues are things that happened in my first year or two of wedding planning. One example is one of my very first weddings. The transportation company did not show up to pick up the bride and groom and the bridal party to take them to the ceremony site where they were going to do their first look and all of their photos. They were under the impression that the transportation company was only going to start after the ceremony and transport them from the ceremony location to the reception space. And I don't remember what the miscommunication was there, but it made it very clear to make sure that you are finalizing all of the details with your vendors, especially a transportation company, in the weeks leading up to your wedding and go over the schedule with them and actually have a printed schedule and make sure that you are both on the same page. In this situation, luckily they had me, a day of coordinator, to be able to call the transportation company multiple times. I had multiple phone numbers for them, so I just kept calling until I got a hold of somebody. And I did this before the bride and the groom even knew that there was an issue, because I knew that they were running behind. So I gave them a call and we were able to sort it out, and we ended up having to get another means of transportation just so that we stayed on schedule. But they were able to come and pick up the bridal party, and it was just a little bit late, but it wasn't anything that kind of affected the overall timeline of the day. But had I not been there, they probably wouldn't have realized until it was quite far past the time that they were supposed to be getting their photos done and ready, because you're not really paying attention to the time on your wedding day. And so this was able to be resolved in a fairly easy way. Another issue that happened a few years back was I was double booked for that day. I was on a wedding and my associate coordinator was on this wedding, and the florist had the wedding date marked for the following weekend. So they were behind from the arrival time of when they were supposed to arrive on site, and so my assistant called and contacted and said, hey, just making sure that you know where you're going, that you're on your way, just trying to get an update. And that's how we found out that they had the wrong date written down. So what she did was she went to the florist, and they were all kind of scrambling. And luckily this was a very professional florist. They were doing everything that they could to resolve the issue, as they should. And so they all kind of worked together to just make a bunch of arrangements on the fly. Unfortunately, this bride had requested certain specific flowers that weren't in the store because they were supposed to be shipped that following week. So that was a bit of a bummer. However, it's one of those things where you have to just kind of roll with the punches and figure out the best way to resolve the issue. And again, she had a coordinator that was able to step in and kind of take care of that. The bride had no idea until she realized that her bouquet was a little bit different than what she had asked for. However, it all worked out, and again, she was the only one that knew anything had gone awry. Everything else looked beautiful. And this is just a perfect example of, again, why you need to finalize all details with every single vendor. So previously, as a day of coordinator, I would create the timeline. I would send it to my couples, and I would send it to people like the DJ and the photographer, who also need to run off of that timeline. I wouldn't send it to a florist previously. I wouldn't send it to a caterer previously. Now I touch base with every single vendor, because even if you think they don't necessarily need to know what time you're getting ready or what time dinner is, it's important that everybody is on the same page and that they understand the timing of the day, and just to make sure they know the right date of your wedding. So, lesson learned. Another example was the photographer took the couple after the ceremony for photos, as is standard. Typically you do bridal party photos and bride and groom photos after the ceremony, and we had touch base, and they said, we'll be gone for about 30 minutes, and then dinner was right after that. So we had planned for the dinner time, had gotten all the guests inside to sit down and get ready for dinner, and no photographer, no couple. Another 15-20 minutes goes by, no photographer, no couple. It had been an hour past the time that they said they would be back. I start to get concerned. I leave, try to find them, can't find them. We're very far behind off dinner at this point, concerned about the guests getting antsy. And so I talk a lot about staying on schedule, having that buffer time, and so that is something that I always want to kind of plan for and be flexible. However, in this particular situation, if this were to happen to you, you want to keep your guests happy. Like, yes, it's about you and your partner and your wedding day, but if you're enjoying taking photos, if you have no issue being late, and you're kind of running behind everything else and your guests are just standing around and waiting, people get antsy, people want to leave, they want to eat. And so in this particular situation, I was about ready to just have all of the guests go through and eat dinner, and then we would do a grand entrance after everyone had already gotten their food. And so that's what we were about to do, and then the photographer and the couple showed up, so it didn't end up needing to happen. But if this is something that happens to you, you want to make sure that you are also considering your guests and keeping them happy and keeping them not antsy. And if dinner is getting really far behind, it's going to push everything else behind, and you want to make sure that you're, finishing all of those things on your timeline in a timely manner and early on in the night, so that the guests that want to see those final things, it's not going to be too late for them, or that you're not running out of time with your photographer and those sorts of things. Another one, this did not happen to me, but this happened to another wedding industry friend that I heard about. The caterer got lost. It was a newer venue, it was far away, and they did not either account for the time it took to get there, or they got lost and ended up showing 2 hours late. So obviously this threw everything off, and rather than just sitting around and waiting and just saying, okay, we're just going to extend cocktail hour until they show up, they ended up doing all of these scheduled items before dinner, so that you could at least still knock all of those out and stay somewhat on schedule by the time dinner happened, which is what I would highly recommend in this situation. If your caterer is running late, or if dinner is running super late, try and do whatever you can beforehand, so that it's not just this period of waiting. So you can do your toast before dinner is even served. You can even do your first dance, you can do your father-daughter dance, do everything you possibly can while you're kind of waiting in that time period, so that when dinner arrives, you can have dinner as scheduled and then just move right into dancing, and then you're not having to just push everything back and try and speed up all of those final items to get them done. And the last example I'll give was I had a couple who had planned to have a food truck at their wedding, and they backed out the night before the wedding. Yeah, that happened. Luckily, however, we had kind of anticipated something would go awry with this food truck because the communication was horrible. So we had planned for this and had a backup caterer come as well. So that's a point I want to touch on, is if you are having poor communication with your vendors, if you are not getting contracts from them, if you are not getting invoices from them, if they are not confirming details with you, don't just blindly trust this vendor and think, well, this is their job, they do weddings all the time, maybe they're just busy, they're still going to show up, they know the wedding date is on this date. Most wedding vendors are very professional and they will show up. Don't just blindly put your trust into somebody that has kind of proven you wrong already. So it's always a good idea to have a backup plan in this situation. We never saw a contract, we never saw an invoice, and so rather than just hoping for the best and hoping that they show up because we had talked about it and they told us that they would be there, we had planned for another caterer to come just in case, and worst case scenario, we have 2 caterers, we have 2 options. Luckily, when they backed out the night before, we already had this backup option. Nobody else knew this was an issue. There was plenty of food for everybody and everything was fine. So just make sure that you are having proper communication with your vendors, and if you are not, it's okay to find somebody else. So things are going to go wrong on your wedding day. It's just a fact of the matter, and likely they will just be small issues. Sometimes they're bigger, and knowing how to handle them and being able to kind of roll with the punches on your wedding day, it's going to make it a lot less stressful for you on your wedding day. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe to get weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice, and we will see you next week.